hopefully the right time. 2:05 p.m. Eastern, just wrapped up a webinar on the top 5 analytical tools for analysts. Went smashingly. If you weren't on, I actually will be doing this again in February. So stay tuned for that time and setup. I will send out an email with that on there. But we went through the 5 tools. They're personally fundamental. They're foundational to what we do as analysts to get work done. And with that, I was very humbled because as I went through the list of registrants, there were actually quite a few people from abroad. So again, thank you to those people as well. So it's great to see that the community as a whole, an international community that is continuing to grow and learn from each other. So thank you for that. And again, hopefully I wasn't into anybody's bedtime at that point. I'm not sure where everybody was or what time of day it was, but it was it was good to see that there were people from abroad. So for those of you joining me at this moment in time as well, one of the other things I had mentioned as we were wrapping up the webinar was to talk about, obviously these top 5 are really fundamental. And after speaking with Dr. Laura Huey and Lorna Ferguson and John Eng, my podcast guest, the last couple of episodes, it made me realize that there is still, in a sense, more for us to do to get things done, to achieve and move forward in the realm of policing. And as analysts, we can definitely help kind of catapult that, I think, a little bit more and send ourselves forward. They have information that they need that, and if you have seen and or heard the last 2 episodes of the podcast, my guest talked about the fact that the information is hard to come by because our systems do not capture it. And as some of us are well aware who work with police officers, sometimes there's a resilience and or reluctance to add some detailed information into there, or if the field isn't required, it doesn't get added in, right? So that ends up being an important piece, as well as trying to find the people, as John and Lorna were talking. It made me realize that connectivity between academia and analysts is actually really important to forge that bond even more so. Command staff and patrol and the different groups within law enforcement itself, as well as obviously the world of criminal justice, is got their own things to deal with sometimes, and to get answers to can be a little difficult, especially if there isn't an analyst there. But for those who are analysts, for those who have the position, do you have the power, the control, in a sense, of that information, that data, and how it gets obviously not just disseminated, but how it gets used, right? What strategies come into play to get done to reduce crime, to reduce victimization? Some of the things that obviously I spoke with Dr. Cynthia Lum last year in terms of reinventing American policing and her research there, with Dr. Lawrence Sherman in terms of the crime harm index. Us as analysts can have that capability of making a better narrative with the information available to us currently, as well as the information that we start capturing, the data we start capturing, to create a better realm of information to generate better strategies. And in order to do that, we need to work with those partners. And academia is a great part of that, because they can help us do the research. We can be the data portals to their research. And to have that get done and get achieved with us being in the middle of it just pushes that momentum for the field of crime analysis, as well as the world of policing, that culture of policing, into a better and newer future. And I really believe that adjustment needs to be made, that change needs to be made within the policing realm. And us as crime analysts, we might be a support staff in a sense, but we really can be the driving force to make that change. The information that we can be putting forward, that context, right, that we can put forward, and we know the questions that we get asked that we're just, you make us cringe a little bit, right? Because it's not the right question to be asking, whether it's from command staff, whether it's from the public, whether it's from city administration, whomever it might be. We know where the story is supposed to go. We know the data that's there and what the context should be, right? As an example, recently, obviously, in our society and our culture, we have the drive forward now with the issues of race and what that's like within our industry, who the police deal with on a daily basis, why, and where does all the data and where does it come from and what does it mean? But there really needs to be a context, because without that context, what story are we really telling? To put it in a better term, when somebody asks for your motor vehicle stop race data, what are you giving them? Is it just the raw data and they do the work themselves? Because as we're well aware, most of our towns, most of our cities, it's not just those residents that we deal with. It's people from out of town. It's visitors. It's seasonal property owners. Maybe there's a college or university in town. Whatever you might have going on, now that changes the whole aspect of the data that was being requested, right? Because maybe only 40% of your motor vehicle stops were actual people who resided in your town. So what is the data of race or gender and ethnicity really going to say about your motor vehicle stops if the only context, in a sense, there for you and your town is that 40% that are your residents, right? Now, what are we saying? What's happening at that point? What's the location that these stops are being made in? Maybe it's a high crime area for either gun violence or shoplifting or whatever the circumstances. We know our data. We know our town. We need to help tell the story of what's in there, because it's always going to be a little different. The laws change. A lot of people aren't familiar with that. I think Massachusetts, I remember a couple of years ago, had a law change where basically a certain level of assault changed basically to create the NIRO code to bump it up from assault and simple assault to aggravated assault. Well, so if you see these increases in the state of Massachusetts for aggravated assault, are you now believing that it's a very violent state? Possibly, but is that correct? Not necessarily. It's only because there's a change that took place. And if you're not familiar with it, you're not aware of it, then that story isn't being told properly, right? One of the things I kick back to sometimes with people who bring up information and stats and try to throw stuff out there is that obviously the numbers don't lie, but there's a story that needs to be there. And sometimes the people reviewing the story, the people who are viewing it, it's very similar to Rashomon. I don't know if people are familiar with it. It is a Japanese story, and it's probably something that stood the test of time, but it is the story of one incident that takes place, told three or four. It's been a while since I've seen the movie, unfortunately, but 3 or 4 different perspectives on that story, right? So one incident, one set of facts in the sense that happened, but now 3 to 4 different perspectives on those facts, and they're all told in a different fashion. So while something might be there in its truth and its raw data form, what's the story that's being relayed? And that's the changes that we need to help make at that point in time. As I told some of the people, if you were in the webinar earlier, thank you for joining me here on the podcast. I will put out a link. So there's a program known as Slack, cross platform. A lot of information can be generated in there, similar to social media. If you're not familiar, take a quick look. They do have some quick demo videos online, and a great tool for networking and connecting to people really almost in real time, right? You can make posts. There are channels that are involved for the different topics that you can post in. You can tag people like you would on other social media contexts. There's an ability to direct message other members of the group. And I find that extremely helpful because you don't need their phone number. You don't need their email address. If they're a member of the group, they're there for you to reach out to. So with that, as I was speaking with Lorna and John, I decided that the best thing to do is to kind of open up my Slack work group to everybody on my email list. And so if you have not already, NIROCA.com, NIROCA.com. Right towards the end, there's a sign up for the email newsletter right at the bottom of that homepage. Drop your information in if you're interested in being on this, whether you're an analyst, a researcher, academia, because I think what we should be doing is connecting, talking, sharing all of this information as close to real time as obviously that is, right? It's searchable. It's something you can, if you want to post a document, if you want to share an article, if you have a spreadsheet of information you want to share, there's a lot that can be added and done within it in its context. And sometimes things get lost in the greater wild. I've been talking too long. In the greater wide world web. No wonder why they just put it as www, right? Some things get lost in the shuffle of all of that information. So what I would like to do is extend that invite to everybody on the email list for anybody who wants to join up and sign in to start having conversations, to start, networking and joining forces with, again, crime analysts. And I ask researchers in academia to sign up as well. If you have PhD students and people who are doing research, because these groups are going to become very important to make these connections, to grow and have these connections, because it is the start of a new change in law enforcement, in policing in of itself, going back more towards the service aspect, right? And a little bit less of the enforcement aspect. I think a lot of research is already showing that the guardianship role becomes more important and more effective than the enforcement role. And so how do we connect with each other to share the information, to figure out what it is I might need at my agency versus what somebody else might need at their agency, and maybe what academia is looking for in order to do some research, and to just draw all of that conversation in one purpose and one bubble and one context. So if you're interested, NIROCA.com, all the way at the bottom, sign up. This is not something I want people to be sharing CJIS information or your classified information or even unclassified information. Just network, be the community that it can be, grow with academia, get the research. If you have a piece of research that you are going to find useful for crime analysts, for law enforcement, for police work, and you want to share it, that's a great thing too. So dump that in there and people will be able to find it and read it and go through it instead of that paywall that I know some people do not like at all, no matter what side of the fence you're on, right? The person who did the research, hoping that it gets used in practice, or the practitioner looking for the research. That paywall is usually I guess it's not not something that anybody's really a fan of at that point. So that will be made available for people in an email that will be coming up next week. I'll share that out as I wait for people to group through and chime in on that. But with that, I will wrap this up. I appreciate, again, everybody coming into the webinar. There will be another one that will be in an email as well. So if you're just jumping in, you're like, what webinar was this? I am doing one in February, again, on the topic. It is the top 5 analytical tools for 2021. And that will be, again, available, something you can register and sign up for, that I will put out through the email service as well as that link for Slack to get everybody connected. Again, if you have any questions about material, podcast, want to see somebody, want to jump on yourself, let me know. Get in touch with me, Nick at niroca.com, NICK at NIROCA.com. Shoot me a message and let me know. Again, you can find me on Twitter if you're not here already, or YouTube if you're not there already. As I start rolling out these video podcasts, as well as the audio ones that drop Wednesday at 6 a.m. So the audio will be available for this Wednesday at 6 a.m. as usual. I do have another guest coming up, and she is going to speak to us about California and the crime harm index that Dr. Lawrence Sherman talked to us about last year, towards the tail end of last year. So how it's actually going to be used, or is being used currently in the state of California. So thank you very much, everybody, once again, for jumping in, taking your time out of your day, and I will chat with you all very, very soon again.